Greetings, nerds. This is Scene a Nerd Podcast presents Blur Trek. I'm your host, Will Polk, and thank you so much for joining us tonight as we're going to get into a spoiler cast of Sinners. That's right, we're talking about the new film that everyone is talking about. It is in the zeitgeist, but with me tonight on this very special edition of Scene a Nerd presents Blur Trek is my wife, Sharlini Sankaran. Thank you so much for joining me. She was so pumped about this movie. She came to me this morning. She's like, Will, can we do a show about this? And I was like, of course. So I thank you so welcome back to the podcast. You joined us on our Senior Nerd a few years ago when we were talking about, I believe, one of the Star Wars movies. I think Rise of the
Yep.
Skywalker, but but welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, we saw Sinners last night, and my head was full of thoughts. And as always, I had like all these vivid, crazy dreams. And I woke up in the morning, and I am the morning person. Will is the later riser, shall we say? And I woke up in the morning, and I had all this time to churn through multiple themes that I was thinking about with Sinners. And when Will woke up, I was like, Will, okay, I want to talk about these themes. I want to talk about da 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 da. So Will was like, okay, let's do a show about it. So here we are.
Yeah. So like I said, this is a spoiler filled podcast. So I'm going to give
So many
you one.
spoilers, lots of spoilers. I
Yes.
can't talk without spoilers. So yes.
Yeah, and at this point, yeah, this is a spoiler filled podcast. So if you haven't seen the film, jump off now, go watch it, and then come back, listen to our thoughts on the movie. So with that, your last spoiler warning, let's jump right in. So again, we are talking about the movie Sinners. This is a spoiler review, and just give a quick little basic overview. I'm reading from the IMDb database, but of course, the IMDb summary is the following: trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. So that's the IMDb database. Summary of the film. Of course, the film is directed by Ryan Coogler. It stars Michael B. Jordan, Miles Canton, who is his first feature film role.
He
He's
was phenomenal.
yeah,
Phenomenal. Yeah.
yeah. Delroy Lindo, Haley Steinfeld is also in it. Winmoon Lusaka, who many folks probably recognize her if you've seen Loki seasons 1 and 2. She's been in the MCU, and Jack O'Connell, and also Jamie Lawson, plus many other folks. This is a period piece film set in 1932 Clarksdale, Mississippi. The film is scored by Ludwig Göransson, who is a frequent collaborator with Ryan Coogler. Star Wars fans will know Ludwig from The Mandalorian. He scores that show. And the brilliant costume designs, which we'll get into some here in our spoiler cast, is by Ruth E. Carter, who is an Oscar winner, and both of us had the opportunity to see her Oscar-winning designs here locally at the North Carolina Museum of Art.
Yeah.
She
So
had
we are big. Yeah, our art museum, our North Carolina Museum of Art is fantastic. We're long-term members. We love it. And they had a traveling exhibit when Ruthie won her Oscar for costume design. And is that right, Will? Is that the
yeah.
right award? Yeah.
Hmm?
And it was amazing. It delved into all, and I'm a person who crafts, I sew, I'm really into, thinking about costumes and design. It was just such an incredible display of all her work, all the details that went into it, all the thoughtful planning, and you could see that thoughtfulness and detail-oriented approach every single detail of the costumes in this movie. It just took you right back into that period.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff, and of course she is a frequent collaborator with Ryan. Of course, she's done both Black Panther films, both the original and also Wakanda Forever. But Charlie, let's
Yes.
tell me as we get started here.
Okay.
Just give me your overall thoughts about the film.
So the first thing I thought is it is a disservice to call this a horror movie. The horror part really complements like so many complex themes that this movie just so beautifully weaves together, right? So it takes place, as Will said, in the 1930s. What's happening nationally? It's the era of the robber barons. It's the era of people getting rich from coal and railroads and steel. It's the era of people. It's post World War One. It's prohibition, and it's um, culturally, I think this movie explores those themes from the lens of the South, right? The Black South. And at the time, it's still segregated. So the movie also gets into so many themes that I found so interesting about um, that era, post Civil War, but still segregation, post Reconstruction, and finding joy, finding beauty, finding love, finding tenderness, finding happiness in the midst of this segregated world that people live in. It also gets into the legacies of our ancestors that we carry with us. And I thought this movie, it was so interesting because you have obviously the movie centered around, the twin brothers who come back, but there's also kind of a subplot that goes back to the Chinese immigrant cultural experience. And there's just a lot in there to unpack. So get me back on track, Will.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
That's
there's just
great. I
there's
mean,
just so much. It talks about
yeah,
colonialism. It talks about like
yeah,
the lens through people view Black society at the time, as well as the lens through how people view themselves. And the thing I loved about it, and then it's also the interplay of, music and art and religion and the new religion, I say relatively new, right? Christianity in the South versus kind of these deeply
yeah,
embedded spiritual practices that live on in your DNA, even if you don't realize it. That,
yeah,
predominantly the African American culture, but also, as I mentioned, a little bit the subplot alludes to the Chinese immigrant and the Asian immigrant culture as well. So I found it super fascinating. I found that the vampire horror plot line was almost complementary, but not really the main fascination of the movie for me.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with with that, and I think also for me, as far as this overall thoughts, I had heard about this film, saw the trailer. It was definitely one of the films that I wanted to see 2025. Profiled it on our main show, and we as far as the top films coming out this year, and also during Black History Month, we had a feature on our main show with my host Sarah Belmont, where we have profiled during Black History Month, Black filmmakers, and also during Women's History Month, very
Mhm.
prominent stories for Women's History Month. But we for 2025, we profiled this one in particular as far as one of the films that's coming out. And if y'all drop it in the chat as far as the in the comments, where you can see it, our list of other films for 2025. But for me, this film, it was, I'd heard it was a vampire movie. When I saw the trailer, it was I was like, oh, this looks really, really good. But it did not give you the level of depth that we're going to get into tonight as far as some of the
Mhm.
themes that Shalini talked
Yeah.
about. Um, Also, the big thing that I think that really struck to me about this film is how much music in and of itself
Yes.
was a character. You had the
Yes.
people, but music itself was a character, and the score and and the utilization of music and to pull together the story. This film, yes, it is a black film as far as having a black director, predominantly black cast, but also it's a four quadrant film because everybody can get something out of it.
Yep.
Because and we'll get into the Irish character, the vampire, who's played by Jack O'Connell. There's that backstory there. There is the whole, of course, the storytelling elements of telling story through song, telling story through visual medium. That Ryan Coogler now is 5 for 5. I mean, quite frankly, between from Fruitvale to now. The other thing too, and then we'll get into some specific points of the film, is that this was an original story. This was not an IP, because prior to this, Ryan of course, we know his work from the MCU. Of course, he also did Creed, which is again being based off the IP of Rocky. But this was a independent story that he came up and he showed that he can not only helm a feature film from an original product, but really tell an amazing story with with and construct an
I
amazing
do want
story,
to
not
say
only
though.
writing and directing. Yeah.
Yep, I do want to say though, it was a completely independent story. It was a story that was really well told. But I want to get back to your point about music being a character in this movie. There is so much through this movie that speaks to, and I said this in my kind of rambling, excited intro in the beginning. There's so much that speaks to the DNA of music that we don't even realize we carry with us, right? So, in the case of, I'll start with the Irish or the Highland, Scottish Irish vampires. That the Highland dancing, that Celtic music, that folk, the folk gathering. I was honored enough to be a guest of my sister's at a wedding with in the UK, people with Irish ancestry, and they had what's called a ceilidh. A ceilidh is a traditional Irish folk dance, so we all learned the steps and we all did it, right? So that is
Mhm.
that thread of and it was beautiful. Everybody dances in a circle. It's joyous, it's celebratory, and it's in the DNA. Like it's just passed down generation to generation. Children grew up, and this is true of cultures all around the world. Greek culture has folk dancing. Pretty much any culture you go to, there is dance is a sort of ritual, and it's a way that connects you to your ancestors, to your beliefs, to your spirituality. And so I started with the Irish Highland dancing, and I think it's almost a cliche to talk about how much music, African music and spirituality have influenced music through today, and African American music, the spirituals, the songs that people, enslaved people sang, those threads come from those ancient rhythms in your DNA. They give you strength, they give you spirit, they have a power. So I think that to me was very evident. And if I may, there's a scene. Do you want to talk about this
Yeah,
later, or you want me to say? Okay, you want me to say that?
let's start with the role of music because yes, it is a vampire story, and we can go through, we don't have
But
to
it's a
necessarily
story
go
about music.
chronological
It's a
with this
story
film. I
about
want to let's yeah, I mean we don't have
It's
to
a
go
story about the
chronological with this film. Let's
transformative
talk about the
power.
music. Yeah.
Yes. It's a story about the transformative power of music, right? And there's two threads here. There is in the main character, Sammy, Preacher Boy, or one of the main characters. He yeah, there he is, Preacher Boy. He comes from a family where his father is the preacher, and he gets pressure and advice to stick to church music, to stick to spirituals, not that sinful music. But the call of the ancestors' music is too strong for him. But then I found myself thinking that they are interwoven. You can't separate one from the other. The reason why African American spiritual music is so moving is because it carries with it
Mhm.
so many
Yeah.
generations of knowledge, of culture, of community, of power.
Yeah.
So I found
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole thing about music. I mean, when the movie starts, I mean, it starts to your point about the spirituality and everything. It starts, with the Sammy showing up at his father's church and the Sunday morning, and it's the story, hearing the children's choir singing,
Yeah.
and so we get that, and then also to your point about the cultural aspects of it, because the with the Irish, with the Irish vampire, there was the whole Irish jig that was
Mhm.
going on there, but the blending of the cultures, the similarities, I guess, because again, the um because earlier, prior to that scene, after everybody got a lot of these folks got bitten by the vampires. We had a very big musical fusion
To
scene.
me,
Uh,
that was such a powerful, visually, musically, that was such a powerful scene, that juke joint scene.
mhm, yeah,
And yeah, I think maybe this is where you were going. You had the scene where they're playing the blues, but then everything revolves, and then you start hearing the drums, you start hearing chants, you start hearing Chinese traditional music, you start hearing, different
yeah,
musical genres, and it even goes into the future, and you start hearing music of today.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just the way that scene was woven together and there's no vampire. This is before the vampires, right?
yeah.
And
Right, right.
just that scene in and of itself was just had so many stories in it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me.
I mean, yeah, that scene to me. I know some. I think so. So there that when that happened, I was, yeah, and we were seeing, because even at the beginning of the movie, we have the cultural Africa and songs and
Mhm.
some cuts to it, and then when we get to that big scene in the juke joint, and we see the evolution from the blues, because the blues has just really, it is the it is a cultural foundation for rock and roll when
Right,
you think about it,
right. And
and
it's in African rhythms.
it's a bit in
And
African
I'm not a
rhythm.
musician, but I am a dancer, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, so the blues, it's very well documented how blues
It's very
music,
well documented.
it,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, very, yeah, how it has, how it influenced rock and roll. And then of course we think about Sammy, the blues musician Robert Johnson, and talk about Sammy's,
Yep.
we'll get to some of the spirituality of it too, but Robert Johnson, with sort of similar to Sammy, where Sammy's dad was like, you can't play this song, this music's with the devil, and that kind of stuff. And then, Robert Johnson in his real life had struggled to to be
Mm,
getting noticed, and then he all of a sudden
mhm,
popped, and people were like thinking,
mhm,
oh, he must have made a deal with the devil, and then so
mhm.
again, to
Yeah,
interwoven the real life history into this film
yeah.
of some of the themes that Ryan was trying to illustrate with this, with many all these various themes in this film, was really interesting. And then also just the similar stories between like Irish immigrants and also African Americans, as far as the use of music
To
to
build community, yeah.
build community and
And
also
to
deal with the
remember your
sorrow.
roots. Yeah, your
Yeah,
sorrow, your roots, your struggles, your suffering. Yes.
yeah. So all those themes are really playing there, real interesting interwoven
Mhm.
dynamic between the two cultures that were really some of the subtext of this film that were, what I really liked about it was that this isn't beat you over the head. It was just organic to the story.
Yes. But okay, can I digress a little bit? And I think
Yeah,
this
yeah,
takes
go ahead.
it into another theme though, but that dichotomy, that pull between kind of like quote unquote good church music
Hmm.
versus the sinful, you know, all out, you're fully embodied, you're fully embracing sensuality, the
Yeah,
rhythms, the drumming. That pull also is, oh, the good music is what the colonialists and the masters want you to follow and leave the bad behind, right? And that other stuff that's uncivilized.
yeah, yeah.
And
Let's get it.
that is
Yeah,
another theme through this whole movie is, what is respectable? And I think with the twin, we haven't even talked about the twins. We haven't talked about
yeah. Oh,
Smoke and Stack, and we're like 20 minutes in, right?
yeah.
Um, but the twins present this veneer of respect, quote unquote respectability. They're dressed well. They carry themselves like gentlemen, and they have money. They talk about fine Italian wine and whiskey, and um, they want to have this classy juke joint, right? But it's a veneer for the, would you say, the rage, the anger, the kind of but also the quest, right? The quest to
Mm,
establish yourself and
yeah, yeah.
celebrate your community, celebrate your success, celebrate your people, come back to your family and your roots. And
Yeah,
I thought that was another theme, and then they have the whole backdrop. The movie has this whole backdrop of it's also the time of the Klan,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
this is all,
yeah.
and it all is so seamlessly flows. We started by talking about the music, but the music also carries those themes.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Smoke and Stack, the two
Yeah.
brothers, and of course there is the wonderful performance by Michael B. Jordan, and put up this photo here of just as we started the podcast. Just want to really get to Shalini's point about the art, the costume design, but
Mhm.
also how the
Yeah.
story, but also I want to use this photo, this image of the two brothers to really uh, flesh out some of the things about them that really does drive and propel the story forward. So, uh, with Smoke and Stack, so Smoke is the one with the blue cap, and it really and it was this was the use of costuming to also tell the story, because he is the more cool, the more
Mhm.
business thinking one. He was the one who met with the gentleman, the clans, the time, the owner of the building there that they want to turn it to the juke joint from their exploits in Chicago, which is a whole nother story we can get into,
Yeah.
as far as them working with the gangsters, and also to your point about building community, and a line that sticks out to me in the film is whenever they do come back home and they're putting together everyone to build this juke joint. They were talking, when they, seeing this as sharecroppers, and and this is something for me that resonated with this film,
Mhm.
because my great grandmother would tell me stories about picking cotton in the 30s and 20s and 30s, and so so seeing that
And
when you
your
think,
family actually, can I say, not to digress too much, but your
yeah,
mom told me this. Your mom's family actually fled
yeah,
South Carolina because the um I guess the person who owned the land
yeah,
was demanding, didn't pay them, and then your great grandfather, or
yeah,
your great grandfather demanded his fair share
yeah,
from picking cotton,
yeah,
and they were threatened with being lynched. So they actually
yeah,
fled for their
he
lives
fled,
from South
yeah,
Carolina to North Carolina.
yeah,
So
but
it's not
yeah,
that long ago. This is
yeah,
not, I was thinking about this, right? This is not that long ago.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing too. As I think about that line, it resonates because that where they talk about the plant, the cotton fields and stuff, and then and when they left, they were part of the first wave of migration from the south to the north, and
Mhm,
the brothers were, and they got wrapped up with the Capone gang, and
mhm,
but one of the things that Smoke talked to Preacher Boy, who's also Sammy, is who's their cousin, is that Chicago was just basically plantation with skyscrapers, and
mm.
so that struggle and the hard work, and even though you thought going to the north was going to like get you out of this thing that you thought that this environment you had in the South, there were still things in the North that were just as daunting, for the two brothers. But the cool thing about their story too is, so of course they do go to North, they do become caught in a gang, but then they also, like, we learn that to whenever they were setting up the juke joint, they had this truck that was like hidden
Yeah,
on the path, and the thing about that truck, it was all, you brought up the fine wines and
yep,
Irish, the beer and that kind of stuff. Well, they stole all that stuff from the
the
gangsters,
mom.
and
Yeah,
then the mob were like, they were like, the mob war was, they were pointing fingers at each other, but it was these two brothers who actually were the ones who stole it, which I thought was just, really,
brilliant,
gets to their,
brilliant.
yeah, gets to them, their story, and their smart and their savviness. But Stack is the so Smoke is the rational one, got the blue hat. Stack is the one with the red hat, and the guy with the gift of gab. He could, like, really talk his way through a situation.
Mhm.
He was very smooth, And so, so those two brothers, and I think one of the things you talked about this morning, I'll hand it off to you, is that the relationships that these brothers had with themselves, but also with the friends and families in the community. So I'll let you
Yeah. Yeah. So I
expand
think
on that.
one of the things I really have come to appreciate, and you see this in Black Panther, you see this in Wakanda Forever, what I've come to appreciate in the way Ryan Coogler depicts relationships is the vulnerability. It's
Mm,
the vulnerability and the tenderness that I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you don't often see Black men depicted in that way of, again, this is a spoiler review, right? So there is a loss of a baby, there's a loss of a child, that grief, that loss. There is a tenderness of coming back to women that you love and vulnerably saying, I love you, I need you. And there are strong women who are independent, who are not waiting on their man, but they're supportive and they provide that love. And to see that expressed in a vulnerable way where it's not macho, it's realistic, and it's really how so many people have tender, open, honest relationships that you don't always see depicted. So again, we're very far from talking about the horror movie theme here, but I really appreciated that, even though there were just a few scenes here and there, that was really the underpinnings of the movie, right? They were like these hardened guys who cheated the mob, but at the end of the day, they were vulnerable. They had a lot of love to give. They had a lot of tenderness. They had joy. They
yeah.
had they had great affection for their cousin. They mentored him. They looked out for him. They
Mhm.
sacrificed a lot for him.
Yeah.
And the the coming back to the women too, that complexity of the one brother chose the path of, well, I'm just gonna save you, and the other brother chose the path of, so I'm gonna save you and have nothing to do with you, and I'm gonna abandon you because it's better for you, because it's too dangerous to be associated with me, right? That But then coming back to that vulnerability to say, no, no, I love you and I need you, I thought was very powerful and very powerfully depicted.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that definitely was. I mean, that was the relationships that they did have, and even Sammy.
Even Sammy, right? That, yeah,
Yeah, with the relationship that he had with Pearl.
with
Um, but think about it. Pick up your
well,
point with the cousins.
he's younger, so for him
Yeah.
it's first love.
Yeah.
But I think it also goes, as we're talking about relationships, you could see it's not spoken out loud, but you can see the inner struggle for the relationship he has with his father.
Mhm.
And coming back to the music, right? The music is
Yeah.
calling him, his gift is calling him in a different direction. His gift of powerful music, powerful song, but you can see that conflict of where he wants to do the right thing as the preacher's son, and he
Yeah.
wants to honor that relationship with his father.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is also depicted in such a subtle way. It's not in your face. And I think that's the thing that struck me about the romantic relationships as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely
It's
at
just
display.
very matter of fact. This is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right to that point too, as far as the two brothers and just their interrelation, their friendships and stuff with people in the town. They, it's something you also raised with the other group, the Chinese, for example, who were there,
Mhm.
and just
Yeah.
the interplay with them. And we'll put a pin in that, because I do want to talk about race and passing and some of the other things here in a minute. But the other character that was very prominent, and I thought stole every scene that he was in, was Delta Slim, who was
Mm.
Delroy Lindo's character,
Oh, wow.
and the friendship that, the relationship he had with the two brothers. And whenever they first go to the train station there in town, as they were trying to pull together the people for their juke joint. And of course, of course, we do see the how powerful Sammy is as far as his musical acumen. But when we first introduced the Delta Slim, is he's sitting there playing a harmonica,
Mhm.
and 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 then and then of course he and Stack have their discussions about, as
Mhm.
far as the negotiation,
Yep.
and that was another
Yep.
cool thing too, was just the as far as the interpersonal relationships among people in the town, and that's where I thought about the Chinese uh, 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 family as well, who were running the shop whenever they were setting up the juke joint. The negotiations of people
Mhm.
and interaction
Yes.
with the commerce that was going for,
Yes.
there's that
Yes.
was going forth during this time period, because the barter, the back and forth, negotiating price, barter, just that the economy of the time and town, I think, was another little small detail. But as those, but to me, as someone, when I get those are the types of things that help me get immersed into the film, because it gave it a
Yeah.
groundedness.
Yeah, and that's why I say I think, this is not even a horror movie. The vampire plot was almost secondary to the whole movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
went into the thing, I was like, I heard the first half's about setup, and then the second half's about the vampire piece. But
Mhm.
even but
No, I don't
but
even, it's
yeah,
it's very
yeah,
seamless. Yeah, should
yeah.
we talk about, what should we talk should we talk about the passing, the
Yeah, yeah,
racial.
I think this is a
Yeah.
good place, given that we're talking about relationships and stuff, because yeah, Haley Steinfeld's character, she we learned that she uh did have a black father, or I guess half, was it
Her daddy was half white or something, is
half
what
white, yeah, yeah. And of course, during that time period, it was still, again, we're talking about Jim Crow South, so miscegenation laws are still in a place, and the one
Mhm.
drop rule is
Yep.
still very, very prominent. And to your point about the relationships, that Stack was like, look, it's not safe for you to be here with me. But clearly they had a prior relationship, but then they left. She waited for him, but she did move on, and she did marry a white, married into a white family and stuff. And there was a lot of background with that too, as far as like, um, you know, the brothers not, paying their respects, but due to the death of her mother. That's a little, that was a little
Yeah.
tension point in
Well,
in
I
the
think,
film.
yeah, to me, it struck me, so that whole relationship and that whole storyline of her, Mary, I think was her name, Mary
Yeah.
passing, struck me. There was actually a pretty prominent character. So Mr. Carnegie,
Mhm.
Mr. Carnegie's librarian, she was a woman named Belle DaCosta Green,
Hmm.
and she was a rare woman in the time of male antique dealers. She went to Europe, and she negotiated to procure the best artworks for Mr. Carnegie. And she was, the best of them all. And after her passing, it, it was revealed, or it was found, that she was actually a black woman who passed as white her entire life and
Mhm.
rose to prominence. She was given responsibility to run the library and to go acquire pieces of art with huge budgets. So watching the movie yesterday, watching Sinners, and how the topic of race and light skinned people passing as white were handled, reminded me of that book that I had read. It's called The Librarian.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Cool.
fascinating read. And yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah.
read, both into the world of art and antiques, and that same time period of, the 1920s and 30s, as well as race relations and passing as white. So
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, that, but that was a very, again, it was just a very important point. I think that, again,
mhm,
not be, that was very important to the story, not only to, with Stack and Mary's relationship, but also as we do get into whenever they do open up Club Juke, which is the name of the juke joint, and whenever we do,
mhm,
we do see the first round of the vampires show up. That was part of, is she going to invite all these, she was, it was given her passing, and then we had these three white people show up at the place. It
Yep.
was sort of like, it was where they go. It was, they were like, well,
Wait,
really,
I'm
you
gonna go.
allow,
Can I go back and correct
yeah,
myself a little bit?
yeah,
I got my
yeah,
robber barons mixed up.
yeah.
So I got my robber barons mixed up. I apologize. So Belle de Costa Green was the librarian for Mr. J.P. Morgan.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, for Mr. J.P. Morgan. And the
okay,
book is called The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. So
mm,
it was Mr. Morgan. Yes.
okay, okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, no, no worries, no worries. Um, but yeah, I mean, to that point though, about barons and passing, and also just thinking about that time period when you still had the J.P. Morgans and the
Hmm.
we're not
The
too far
Carnegies
from
and
that. The Carnegies, we're not too far from the Gilded Age, and that's also
mhm,
very took it to another piece of literature about that time, The Great Gatsby. Um, let's talk, and also just the larger point of the world too, because um, the two brothers that mentioned this before, they were also war veterans from the First
yeah.
World War.
Yes.
And another thing that you talked about, and something I wanted to bring up too, as we think about the vampires, as it's because we were really getting into the vampire portion of the film. It is colonialism,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and and with the Irish and the British, there's that history of the British going, of course there's the colonialism and stuff that happened with Africa, but also how Britain and Ireland have had that very contentious relationship, and a lot of Irish had to, move out
Hmm.
from,
Hmm.
because of that, it came to the States.
Yep.
So yeah, so pick up
So
on that. I wanted you to pick up on your
I
thoughts on
think it was
colonialism.
interesting how, the vision that the vampires offered was equality and everyone being treated the same, and they don't segregate,
Hmm.
and you know and that's what they were trying to use to lure people. They said, why don't you come be with us, and we're all one people, coming back to
Hmm.
that whole idea of community and belonging. But the theme, and I'm feel like I'm circling back to the music, the dancing, the rituals, the themes of colonial, the religion, the pressure to be that the pressure to play the good music, to be a
Hmm.
good Christian, to adopt the religion of the colonizers, um is a very powerful theme that runs through the entire movie and is really
Hmm.
brilliantly woven in.
Yeah.
And the fact that the old ways, there are still people who remember and carry on the old ways. The girlfriend of is it Stack's girlfriend, Will? The one who figures out about the vampires.
Oh, Smokes girlfriend.
Smoke's girlfriend that figures out about the old ways, and she figures out what's really happening, and
Hmm.
she makes a magical amulet that she believes and Stack believes keeps him safe.
Hmm.
Right? They allude to
Yeah.
that quite a bit. And I, I know that there's still superstitions, there's still that knowledge that continues, right? Even through
Yeah.
the efforts of colonialism to stamp it out. And I thought that
Yeah.
was also very beautifully and brilliantly depicted throughout the movie.
Totally, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
the that was definitely brought woven throughout the movie. And the other thing about colonialism too, and something we were talking about music and the collectiveness and stuff,
Yes.
and thinking about too what some of the discourse lately about this film itself, take it out of the film, but just into the
Hmm.
real world, and about
Hmm.
Ryan Coogler being able to
Yeah.
get the
Amazing.
ownership rights up to this
Yes.
film
Yes.
after 25 years, and thinking about again historic context of the blues, and how cultural appropriation happens, and to your point about in the religious context, it's like the good music versus the
Yeah.
the bad
But also,
music, and
and
yeah,
claiming the space, right? Claiming the
yeah,
joyful space to
yeah,
celebrate, to play music, to be loud, to be happy, to
yeah,
have relationships. To all those were not things that were allowed
yeah,
under colonialism and slavery. So
Yeah.
just the fact of coming back to the South and opening a juke joint where people can
Mm.
come, you can dance, you can stamp your feet, you
Yep.
can sing, you can make love, you can,
Yeah. Yeah. Raise hell
it,
on
it,
Saturday and then be saintly on
yep,
Sunday. I
mhm,
mean,
yep.
that was sort of the theme of the juke joint, but also it was a safe place because
It was a
again to
safe
get
place.
into yeah, because think again, you worked hard in the fields, and everything, and then you had this safe place to go
Hmm.
to just be
Yeah.
free and all. And then, but I think about the vampires, and when you think about vampirism, and this was, I think, was a fresh take on vampirism. I thought
Yes.
this film had that takes it from just your typical vampire film to another. Is we always think with vampires, you're the bite and we saw the typical things as far as you can't kill them and they come back
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
they're scared of
But
garlic and yeah, all
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, all the traditional beats were there, but I think the underlying cultural appropriation of that the belonging and wanting to be
Yes.
one. I think on the one hand it seems very innocuous, but on the other hand it's just like they're just going to just take everything about you and just suck it all out of you
And assimilate,
uh,
right?
and
It
assimilate.
assimilate
Yeah,
it.
and I
Yes.
think and I think that's what made the vulture. That's what made this film more take it to the next level than just a basic vampire movie.
Yes. So should we close by we've been going on for quite a bit longer, Will, than
Yeah,
we had
yeah.
planned to.
I know
But
we planned to talk 20 minutes. Here we are, 40. But I think I'm enjoying
yep.
this. So yeah,
Should
yeah,
we, I don't know if you had other things on your list, but should we close by coming back to the just the visual richness of this film? We started out talking about
yeah,
costumes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
we referenced a couple of times the music. We've referenced the juke joint and
yeah,
the way,
yeah,
the costuming, the way. Yes, there you go. You kind of
yeah,
put it up
yeah.
before I said it. But when I was watching that scene and listening to the music of in the juke joint where they had the live music playing and everyone's dancing, it immediately reminded me of that painting, Will, that you had just up. Can you bring it back? It's Sugar Shack
Yeah,
by
yep,
Ernest Barnes, who's actually a native of Durham, North Carolina. So the interesting thing, Sugar Shack was painted a little later in the 70s, but the composition, the way this scene is composed, just even the backdrop, the wooden floors, the people, the costuming, everything about that juke joint scene just reminded me so much, particularly of this painting. And I just wonder if there
yeah,
was a intended or a subconscious homage to Ernie Barnes and his work depicting joy of music and dance and celebration, which again is the theme that we've, I think, talked about quite a lot in that movie. And I just, in that moment, I just felt so immersed. And
yeah,
that it
yeah,
just really struck me, right? The
yeah.
importance of continuing to depict joy and celebration and relationships and authenticity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up because while I was watching the film, and I know after we finished last night, I didn't think of it at the time, but there are those images and
Hmm.
things that are just that resonate with you. I mean, many people probably are familiar with who've seen the painting Sugar Shack. It was on the show Good Times.
Yeah,
Um, in
and
the in the
It was
credits.
a Marvin Gaye album cover too.
It was.
Hmm.
So, so there have been, but uh other places where people may have seen it didn't even realize it. But I do completely agree with you that I think that the scene that and the shot that Ryan and his director was thinking of, whether subconsciously or consciously, was a Sugar Shack because it just
Yes.
really that it was just visually it was there. I could just probably hear him like telling his director of photography. He's like, "Remember, have you ever seen pulling up Sugar
Good
Shack on their
times.
phone or
Yeah.
whatever?" Yeah, or when they were doing storyboards when they were planning this
Mhm.
film. I can imagine that was part of their discussions whenever they were like, "How are we gonna set up this film or set up this scene?" And that is totally the inspiration for it. Clear as day. But yeah, the visual point, like I said, we did talk about the costuming and stuff, spot on period. costuming. There was also I know we did one other thing too that before two things I wanted to hit before we drop is the Choctaw Indians and their warnings to
Mm,
the Klan people, because again, whenever Jack O'Connell is the character, but his character's name was Remick, he, you know, thinking back to the appropriation discussion that we had a few minutes ago, and I think,
mhm.
and I think the context there was they were trying to take over the Native American tribe, and they only had them in the film for just a very short part of the time. But they clearly forced him out, because whenever he first shows up at the uh, two clan members' house,
Yeah,
uh, he was all
it's a
scarred, beaten,
yeah,
and stuff, because they had forced, they figured it
yeah,
out and got him out of
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And so I bring that up because they whenever they showed up at the door, they tried to warn those people, be
Well, I'm
careful
gonna say
about.
two things. I'm gonna say
Yeah,
colonialism again, and I'm
yeah,
gonna say dismissal of traditional indigenous knowledge, which is
mhm,
another theme. At the end of the day, it was that traditional indigenous knowledge and the community that
yeah,
saved them.
yeah,
And with the Choctaw Indians and showing up to the Klansmen, the white people's house,
yeah,
they were greeted with suspicion and they were they turned away because it was starting to get dark, right? So
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
again, it carry again, it's very subtle, it's a very short scene,
yep,
but it echoes those themes, and under which is again why this movie is so brilliant and so multi-layered.
yeah, yeah. So there was that piece, and then the second piece related. I'm blanking on it now, but it'll come back to me. Um, oh yeah, it was just the costuming of, we talked about that, but also the relationship between the brothers, because it really ties to the end of the film. Um,
Mm,
because at the end of the day, even well, yeah, there was a relationship with the brothers, and also one of the things you asked me last night, we were talking about, about the why, how did what was keeping the vampires out, and the only way they were finally able to get in, and this is another cool thing that I thought was really great about how they took things about from the different path from some vampire films, is they had to be invited in. They could not, every time they came to the
that's right.
club
That
too,
that's a traditional vampire lore.
yeah, have to invite them
You
in.
have to ask them in. They cannot
Yeah,
enter without being invited. Yes.
yeah, but yeah,
That
you
goes
can't be
back to
invited.
like the original
Yeah,
Dracula movie. Yes.
yeah. And the thing that they were trying to work around that was whenever uh uh, June, I think her name was Grace Choi, I believe, was the mom of
Mhm. Oh yes, the husband.
the husband was trying to go to town to save their daughter, got
Yes.
bitten, and then because of her, they were using her to to basically break down the defenses, and they were able to briefly to get into the club
Mhm.
juke.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so that there was that piece, and then the last 2 points I'll make, and then we can close, is the relationship with the brothers, and how it just sort of sets things up for the end, because the um you know Stack was bitten, because he did have the relation, they were, the earlier in the film, Mary left, and she encountered Remick and the other two vampires, and of course they were able to, they bit her, and she comes back to the place, and then she in turn bites Stack because of their
Yes,
relationship,
and she's invited in
and
by
she's invited in because, yeah,
yes,
yep,
because
yep,
she yeah,
to tie that
bamboozles.
back to what we were just, yeah, to,
Yeah.
t- to tie it back to what we were just talking
Yep.
about, the
Yep.
vampires being invited
Yep.
in, so that's how
Right.
they were able to get into
Right.
the house, into the
Right.
club juke. Um, but the the relationship between the brothers, at the end of the day, they're so protective of one another, and we learn that Smoke could not kill Stack. After they figure
This
out
is a
how
major
the two
spoiler.
things.
Major
Yeah,
spoiler.
yeah. Well, if you're with
Major.
us by now, you've watched the film, so if you, I can't help it if you like. We warned you at the beginning. This
It
is a
says
spoiler.
spoiler right there. Yes.
Yeah, kept it up for the whole time. Um, but yeah, but of course we do. We begin the film with Sammy. We end the film with Sammy. We get to the beginning there with Sammy at the beginning. With showing up to church. Sammy figures out. Sammy kills Remick. The very instrument that his father told him not to use. To be the devil's instrument ended up being the thing that saves him. The music and the silver banjo,
Mhm.
and then you know Smoke takes out the clan does show up because that was sort of that was one of the things that we learned the motivations about the truth about the building that the Club Juke was
Mhm.
on,
Mhm.
and then fast forward to um, you know Smoke does take out the clan. Smoke passes away. He goes to the afterlife because again he was
Mhm.
free to be with what was her name? I can't remember her name, but
Mary.
Not Mary, the
Ah,
other,
yes. Yes.
yeah,
I can't remember
yeah,
her name. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
the voodoo
Yes.
princess,
Yes.
yeah. Uh, and but we get so as we all know, we get to the mid credit, and we talked about this last night, and I've had some time to think about it. Want to hear what your
Mhm.
thoughts are now, and we'll close. Stack and Mary show up at Perline's, and Sammy, Sammy grows up and he goes on to have
Yep.
he leaves town. He has a wonderful career. Just a little cameo there by Buddy Guy, who plays the
Yeah.
older Sammy, and at Perline's, and Stack and Mary show up, and at
In
first
full 90s outfits, which is
yeah,
also just amazing
it's like
period
60,
costuming. I was like, "Oh, I
yeah.
we actually wore those
Yeah,
things."
yeah,
Yes.
it was like 1992, so it's like, what,
Yeah.
70
Yep.
years
Yep. Yeah.
later, I guess? Yeah. If I'm doing my
60.
math right, well, 60 years
60.
later, yeah.
Yeah.
60 years later, yeah, yeah, my bad, yeah, we're like, yeah, my bad. Um, but, at first, I was like, it felt like it was the Return of the King multiple
Mhm.
endings, but, the conversation that they had there, I'm glad now that I've actually the ending works for me because at the end of the day, Stack has the proposition you could have everlasting life and immortality if you just become a vampire.
Uh-huh.
And Sammy says no. Because at that point, because Stack sniffs over, he knows death is imminent for Sammy because he
Yeah.
smells death around him.
Yeah.
And he offers him that. And I just thought to me, the more I thought about it, that was like the perfect ending to this film, where Sammy's like, I've lived a full life. I'm content with what I have. So no, I don't want your offer.
Mhm.
That to me, that mid credit.
Yeah, I have to think about this one a
Yeah,
little bit more because
yeah,
I thought they should have just ended it where it ended without the
mm,
epilogue,
mm,
and maybe had the epilogue be Sammy, at 75. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. That's a I hadn't thought about that perspective. Yeah,
yeah. I just thought about
he
that
has a
today.
choice and he rejects it.
Yeah, yeah, because I've had a full life. I achieved everything I wanted, and
Mhm.
that was a very,
All right, this
me
is
as a
way
very
past
mature
my
thing.
bedtime. I know we can talk about this all night, but it is way past my bedtime.
Yes, it is. But thank you so much for joining us. So, if you watch Sinners, let us know what you thought about our discussion and about the film in the chat. We would love to hear your perspectives on this film. Definitely want to go see it again. But before we go, Shalini, let people know where they can find you.
At Shalini underscore NC on Instagram. SHARLINI underscore NC. Thanks for
Great.
letting me join you all. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, yeah. And you can always find me on all the socials at Will and Polk. Visit our website at www.cinenerdpodcast.com. Find us on Twitter at Scene a Nerd. Find us on Blue Sky at Scene a Nerd. Instagram and Threads at Scene_N_Nerds. Be sure to follow us all the social platforms, but also most importantly, rate, review, comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast. With that, good night, good out. You're welcome.
Good night,